All right, guys, welcome back to the Canadian Real Estate Homefront Podcast. This is episode 47 today. But before we get started, if you're interested in buying or selling real estate, or you just want to have a chat about the market, you can click the first link in the description below. It'll take you to our Calendly, and we'll just go over your real estate needs. And honestly, you can just see if we're a good fit for you and any of your real estate transactions. So there's no pushy sales tactics. It's just basically to get to know us a little bit more other than the pod and see how we work in transacting real estate. So with that being said, let's hop into the first topic today. So what we've been seeing right now is we've been seeing Trudeau really just like pushing this agenda of affordable housing, and for good matter, right? Since 2015, since the Liberals got into office, there's obviously been a lot that happened: COVID, record low interest rates, and then the fastest rate hike cycle we've ever seen in Canada. So yeah, we've seen Pierre Poilievre be really good at social media and really banging the drum, blaming Trudeau for the housing crisis. And what Trudeau's been doing is actually pretty crazy, in my opinion, because he's basically backtracking, and his cabinet is backtracking on everything that they first stood for, like high immigration and all those different policies that they had. So just came out is Trudeau announced that this new housing initiative plan, basically, like, what he said was that he wants all provinces to have fourplexes, like basically abolish single family zoning and allow for fourplexes everywhere. And what he said was that if provinces don't match up with him and what the federal government wants, then he's going to go right to the municipalities. So right away, Ontario and Quebec rejected this. And they just said, no, like, we're not doing that. You're overstepping your jurisdiction. And it sounds like these people don't want affordable housing, but I don't think that's actually the case. I think that just to allow fourplexes anywhere, it might not be needed. Like, an example would be like rural Saskatchewan or something like that. Like, why would there be a fourplex there? They have other issues that the province needs to tackle. So Quebec actually fought back and said too, we're not just going to, have this blanket statement from the federal government, because they need to fix the core issue, which is too many people coming into the country. And I know this podcast really bangs this drum of immigration being too high. And when we first started saying it, a lot of people were mad at us. And now as time goes on, a lot of Canadians understand, and even immigrants understand, that this dream they're being sold isn't actually a reality. And I was listening to this TikTok actually, and it was talking about international students. And basically what this international student was saying from Nigeria was that you really are coming here for the passport. So what he's saying is that so many recruiters go to these countries, and obviously these recruiters, they're getting a commission if they do bring students over. And why it's so lucrative was, this one guy was saying that a lot of domestic students, so Canadians, are skipping out on post-secondary school. And it makes sense, right? Like, they don't want to come out of school with a mountain of debt. The job market isn't what it used to be when, for my example is, when my dad was in the job market after school, that piece of paper doesn't guarantee a 6-figure job or anything like that. So a lot of people are going into trades, or they're just doing other routes where they're not going to university. So that kind of hurts their profits. So what's happened, and I don't have evidence of this personally, but what's happened is they're sending the recruiters over to these countries like Nigeria, like India, like China, and they're saying, come to Canada and you'll eventually be able to get your permanent residency, get the passport, and you can bring your family over. And why that is beneficial is because the Canadian passport is really good when you want to go to other countries. You don't have to pay an exorbitant amount of fees to get a visa in another country. And what they also said was that you can't just like get a loan if you're an international student. You have to pay cash. Maybe you can get a loan from your home country. I don't think so though. So not all international students are very rich, but a lot of them are, where they can afford to pay 3x the tuition to come to Canada and go to school here. So, with that added wealth comes the ability to buy housing. And that has also really hurt the housing market and the rental market, because you have an abundance of international students coming here. And what it seems to be is that Canadian schools are good, but they're not the best in the world. But it seems to be to get that passport because it's so friendly around the world. So I found that really interesting to hear that. But anyways, so Trudeau made more announcements. He announces more measures to speed up construction of homes. With Budget 2024, we're making it easier, cheaper, and faster to build more homes in Canada, said Trudeau in a statement. Today's announcement will cut red tape, speed up development, and build more homes so that Canadians, from teachers to nurses to construction workers, can afford to stay in the communities where they work. The Prime Minister announced that his government will be delivering a $15 billion top-up to the apartment construction loan program to build a minimum of 30,000 new apartments. Trudeau also announced new reforms to the apartment construction loan program, an initiative that boosts the construction of new rental homes by providing low-cost financing to home builders. The Prime Minister also announced the launch of Canada Builds, partnering with provinces and territories to build more rental housing across the country. Now, all this sounds so good, but it's just this delayed effect where this should have been happening years ago. And I think that's where people kind of find this frustration, is that, now you're seeing Trudeau say the things that Canadians wanted to hear so long ago. He came out and said as well, he's going to cut immigration. They're going to look into their policies more. They're going to have less non-permanent residents because what he's saying is that labor is cheaper than some domestic labor. So, these non-permanent residents are working for a cheaper rate than Canadians are, which is putting Canadians out of the job market or, hurting their cost of living because of these non-permanent residents coming into the country. He's almost putting blame on them in a way, but his immigration minister, Sean Fraser, who ironically is now the housing minister, their party is responsible for all this mess. And now they're blaming them, saying, because of them, wages are cheaper. But no, because of your irresponsibility, over-promising, allowing recruiters to go, and this whole mess has now caused too many people to come into Canada. And he said something along the lines of, basically, Canada can't absorb this much immigration. So non-permanent residents are going to go down, as well as international students are going to go down as well. And he mentioned in his press conference that some international students are living under bridges, which is incredibly sad. You come from another country, you're already leaving your home, and now all of a sudden you're living under a bridge because there's not adequate housing. So to bring in so many people when you already knew you had a housing crisis is it's insane, really. And to kind of go into my next point here, because a lot of people are well, maybe they didn't know about it. Sorry, I'm just gonna take a drink of water. Ben Rabideau, he's a founder of North Cove Advisors and Edge Real Estate Analytics. And I watched an interview with him on the Loonie Hour, and it was really eye-opening to me because he's been beating this drum of immigration being way too high. Even before, when the federal government was setting their targets, he was hired as a consultant, and he knows way more about this stuff than me. I'm just trying to paraphrase what he said. But he said that he was telling them for years, you have way too many people coming in. And then Mark Miller, who's the new immigration officer for Canada, he's now said that they're going to pull back on that as well, Trudeau said in his press conference. So what he said was that basically Ben has done the math, and what he thinks is that we're going from 1.2 million people down to about 250,000 to 300,000 immigrants per year. So you're seeing a 5x decrease in the amount of people that will come to Canada. And this is if the Liberals stay in power, right? So if the Conservatives get in, that number may even decrease more aggressively. It's hard to know for sure, but it seems like Pierre Poilievre and his cabinet have been beating this housing drum for so long and talking about, having too many people chasing too few goods, which is causing inflation, that he may even decrease those numbers even more. And I know there is this idea and this sentiment that basically people need to retire and we need to bring people here for jobs. But it's also how many people are already here that could take those jobs. It is a question that I'm not too sure. So, this could be a bearish case for real estate. This is the headline that I have here. Canada's bullish case for real estate always seems to be immigration. Even when I first got into business in 2017, that was a big, big thing that every realtor talked about. And even economists back then was that immigration is going to push up house prices and everyone who comes here needs a place to live. And truthfully, that simple economic theory has been right for the past few decades. But what happens when that pace starts to drastically slow? and you have a lot of people who bought rental properties, and now we're not filling up these rental properties, or you're not having as many people needing to buy these homes. So he talked about immigration targets for a long time, and it's kind of like you're wondering if the slowdown in immigration will create a slowdown everywhere, like what it should do. And it's going to take a lot longer than just 1 year, probably 5, 6, 7 years. What it should do is it should alleviate some pressure on the housing market, on healthcare, on many, socioeconomic factors as well, because you have less people coming into the country. And, a year ago, you would have been crazy, or would have been, political suicide to talk about these things. But now with so many Canadians and, even non-permanent residents coming here and feeling this pinch, you're seeing it in the polls, and you're seeing people have this, change of tune, saying, Canada isn't once what it was. The opportunity isn't there anymore. It's a mess. And it's not just domestic people who are saying that. It's people who are coming to the country and actually going back to India. I see it on my Instagram all the time, is people saying, hey, we came to Canada, wasn't what we thought it was. We're going back to India, or we're going to Dubai, or they're finding other places to go and live, which is really interesting. But also they're going away from provinces that were historically so popular. An example being Vancouver. More people from, not Vancouver, the province, British Columbia, the province. We're seeing more British Columbians flee to Alberta than we have in a decade. So it feels like people are just, if they are Canadian or they're living in Canada and they're living in a big city like Toronto, like Vancouver, they're quickly saying to themselves, I can't afford a house. I can move, and I don't want to leave Canada. What I can do is I can go to another province where I can pick up a house in my price range rather than live in a rental property or live in a box in the sky, right? You can get a condo in Toronto, or you can go to Alberta, say if you can work remotely, or you can keep the job that you have, and you can get it for the same price. In Alberta, doesn't have land transfer tax. You can get a whole house with land. You can start building that family. But if you live in a 1-bedroom apartment in the sky in Toronto, you're probably not having a child anytime soon. You don't have that backyard that you want. So that's what we're seeing, is we're seeing a lot of people in Canada move to provinces that have cheaper real estate. And as the saying goes, they're moving for greener pastures. So just to touch on that. Then we had a report from RBC, which, I don't think it's a shocker to many, but here's the headline. It's never been tougher to afford a home in Canadian history. Again, in news that may come as no surprise for Canadian homebuyers and would-be homebuyers, it's officially the most unaffordable time ever to purchase a home, according to RBC Economics. Canadian household earning a median income needed to spend a tough-to-swallow 63.5% of its salary to cover the cost of owning an average home at market price. So this is just the average home. It's going to take 63% of your income. We're not talking about your cell phone bill, your insurance, your car, your groceries. If you have children, there's so many other things that you need to try and afford. So again, that's why we're becoming a nation of renters. But while affordability worsened in every market RBC tracks, the country's most expensive markets, Vancouver, Victoria, and Toronto, experienced the biggest deterioration. The figures aren't for the financially faint of heart. In Vancouver, a household would need a whopping 106.3% of median Canadian household income to cover home ownership costs. So just think about that for a second. Your median income wouldn't even cover, like if all of your income, you didn't eat, you had nothing else, it wouldn't even cover the cost of home ownership in Vancouver. Toronto's figure is 84.8%. It's worst level ever. So even Toronto, you'll have like just about 15% left of that median income if you bought the average house there. So we see the growing likelihood of rate cuts starting mid-year as a turning point for housing affordability in Canada. We expect lower borrowing costs will restore some of the massive losses during the pandemic. And what's crazy, and it's always been kind of in my head, is this idea that these cities are going to lose all this middle class work, but important work that cities need, because nobody can afford to live there. And even the outskirts have gotten so unaffordable too, right? Like Trudeau touched in his press conference that if you're a nurse or a teacher, like how are these people ever going to afford to get into the housing market? They won't. their salaries just aren't able to keep up with the high cost of living, right? You can say, a teacher makes $80,000, $90,000. And, on paper, maybe 5, 10 years ago, that was a good amount of money, but now it's like 100K isn't much to live off. And it doesn't go very far. So I think that we're going to see mass exodus from cities. I think we're already seeing it. I'm seeing it in my day-to-day, people going as far as they can from the city to be able to afford a home, because, some people don't want kids, but some people do want a family. And to do that, you have to go further than half an hour away from the city, or you have to go, away from your parents. I think that's a big struggle for a lot of people is leaving friends and family behind. I always think to myself, if I left to another province, how hard would it be leaving the life that you've built at home behind for a house or for something like that. So you'd really have to have a solid partner and you're both on the same page to do something like that, I think. But, obviously you can make new friends, but, as parents get older and things like that, it's tougher just to see yourself only seeing them maybe around holidays, or having to take a plane to see your mom or dad. So, or even having the grandparents see their kids, right? Like your grandchildren, it's hard. And maybe they move with you too. I've seen that happen as well. So anyways, our last topic here, I'm just going to take a quick sip of water before we get into it. These solo episodes aren't easy. Okay, so I've experienced this a lot. This overbidding intensifies with the arrival of GTA's spring selling season. So actually a guy at the gym asked me this, like, when is the best time to buy? And like most people will say yesterday or whatever. But honestly, what I've seen is that December is a great time to buy because people's minds are just elsewhere. Christmas is coming. Everyone always says to themselves, I'm going to start taking this serious in the first couple of weeks of January. And then nobody really wants to list their home in January and February because they don't have the nice photos. The backyard doesn't show well because it's winter and it sucks. So usually what happens is that you kind of have low inventory, right? And then you have this pent up demand because people have, these New Year's resolutions and, now it's the time to move. We're going to do it now. So December is a perfect time to buy because anyone who's on in December, maybe they're not getting the best advice from their realtor or they have to sell, right? It's always been such a good time to get out there and try and snag something because people are just, their minds are somewhere else. And then what happens in January and February is a lot of people aren't listing their homes because of the weather. But then all of a sudden people have this insatiable demand to go out there and buy a home because it's the new year. They want to get in the summertime, or they just want to cross this off their bucket list. So what we've seen in the GTA is this big influx of bidding wars, and not everywhere. It's very saturated to a few areas and not condos per se. Obviously some condos will get it, but here's some stats. In March, 43% of GTA neighborhoods found themselves in overbidding territory. Compare that to just 25% in February and 35% from a year ago. An additional 6% were selling at asking, a figure that was roughly unchanged month over month, and 51% were underbid, down from 69% over the same period. So still 51% of the sales were under asking price, which is obviously good, but it was 69% before that. So despite Canada's persistently high borrowing costs, prospective homebuyers perhaps are growing impatient, coming out of the woodwork in the GTA, and some have their hearts set on the same hot neighborhoods. That said, with more than half of the neighborhoods remaining in underbidding territory, a significant number of buyers still appear to be purchasing homes below asking, particularly in the condo market. So yeah, it's, to say over asking is like, it's tough because it's like something that a realtor wants to just post about, because if you list a home at $1 million, but it's really worth $1.3 million, then obviously you're going to get over asking price. But it is a good strategy for a seller in a sense, if they know that demand is there, if they're going to get 10, 12, 15 offers. And trust me, I've been on semis and been bidding on them with some clients in the junction of Toronto, in Riverdale, which is like East Toronto, the Danforth, those areas. And, there's been 10, 12, 15 offers on some of these things. So that market is definitely moving, and that demand is there for these detached homes. Where are these people getting the money from? It's hard to say, right? They could be move-up buyers. A lot of people get money from parents to help them, like equity that they've built within their home. So there are ways that people are making it happen. But yeah, it's definitely crazy to see GTA is heating up again. But with that being said, when we see this high demand, right? You know, your neighbor starts to see 10, 15 offers, and they were holding out on selling, because a lot of what Canada does, and a lot of people in Canada, which is almost the right thing to do, is when the market's slow, they just wait for a hotter market, because it's always came, right? It's always come around the corner. The market has always eventually picked up. In 2017, they did the buyer's tax. I think the foreign buyer's tax, they did it in 2016 in Vancouver, I think. But in my area, the market completely stalled. And then, you know, you let time go on. 2018 was a little slow. 2019 was a little slow. 2020 came, rates went down. All of a sudden the market's back. Multiple offers are back. So if you're a seller and you're seeing that, you're saying to yourself, okay, now it's time for me to go on the market. And as more sellers start to do that, and we'll see more inventory too, as people take better photos, as the flowers blossom, as the trees blossom. So I think that will hopefully alleviate some pressure, because rates are, you know, they're still high. We're seeing the bond yield go up again, the 5-year Canadian bond yield. Remember, that's attached to the fixed rate. So that rate is also increasing. And then we did see inflation come down. We talked about this on the previous podcast, but it'll be hard to say, right? People were pricing in a June cut. Now they're pricing in a July cut. So it feels like we're just always pushing back these rate cuts. And the US, the Federal Reserve, because their economy is so much bigger than ours, right? They're the dominant economy in the world. People really can't forget that. Basically, if they don't cut, how can we cut aggressively? How can the Bank of Canada cut aggressively? Because they really can't, because our dollar's already not keeping up with the US dollar. Their economy is more productive than us. Yes, their inflation is higher, but you could argue their inflation is higher because they have a more productive economy, and people have better mortgage rates, and they don't have to cut back spending as much. So it's tough to say when Canada is actually going to cut. Like, if they didn't cut at all this year, I would be shocked, because I think our economy is starting to really feel the effects of these high rates. You know, renewals are coming. The Bank of Canada is seeing this. GDP per capita is really low. The Bank of Canada is telling, you know, the federal government that Canada has a really bad productivity problem, that we need to become more productive. And what does that mean? It means finding ways to export more, create more jobs, incentivize people to invest. And that's just not happening right now. So I guess with all that being said, there's a ton of headlines going on in Canadian real estate. It's hard to say where the market is going for sure. And again, I'm of this thesis that you have to take it week by week, unfortunately, but it just is what it is in this type of economic environment. But I don't think we'll see rate cuts. I think we'll see one in the summer. I think we'll see like a 25 basis point from Tiff Macklin. Again, remember, the bond traders will trade accordingly, so that'll bring down the fixed rate. But spending is still out of control. It seems like Trudeau is just out there for political reasons, trying to get back into office, trying to appease people, which I really just don't think is going to happen. So again, we can talk about all these policies that Trudeau is going to bring in, but the election is next year. And right now it's looking like the Conservatives will get a majority of the seats. And then all these policies that they're talking about and creating will change, which will change the real estate market. So that's why it's good to listen to this podcast and other podcasts like I do, and just stay up to date with what's going on, so you can try and make the best decision for yourself and your family. But I think that's it, guys. I've been ranting for a little bit here, and I think there's some good headlines there, and we're definitely going to keep this train rolling at the Canadian Real Estate Homefront Podcast. If you're new here, consider liking and subscribing. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. We're trying to grow on YouTube. If you want short form stuff, we are on Instagram and TikTok. We're making a new subscription thing on Instagram where you can subscribe for exclusive content, which I will just be putting out more real estate news basically. It's going to be $7 a month, something like that. And if you guys think that's too expensive, you can let me know. I can drop the price or something like that. I'm not too opposed to it, but we're going to do some exclusive content there. Just some things coming up in the new year. And really why we do this stuff is we try and give you guys free education. And in turn, when you want to make a move, we're located in the GTA, that you call us and you hopefully want to work with people who are educated and can help you make the best decision for yourself or for you and your family. And we're getting a ton of calls booked with you guys, which is amazing. We can't thank you enough for that. And we're here for it. And we definitely want you guys to click that link and book a call more. And if you don't want to book a call and you just want us to come right over or meet in person, just send us a DM or send us an email. That'll all be down in the description. Last thing, if you're on Apple Podcast or Spotify, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. It just helps the algorithm. I don't know much about it, but I think it helps and pushes it out to more people. So anyways, guys, thanks again. I know it was a solo episode, But I hope you guys got some value out of it, and we'll definitely see you next week. Take care.